Good evening and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm your host, Eugene Chan. Our guest tonight is Ms. Teresa Chang, who has been our Secretary of Justice since 2018. She is the government's chief legal advisor and a member of the Executive Council. Prior to that, she was a senior counsel in private practice and has been involved in arbitrations, not just in Hong Kong and mainland, but all over the world in London, Europe and Asia. We have invited her to talk to us about how the rule of law continues to be upheld in Hong Kong, and with the upcoming Legislative Council election, how we can exercise our right to vote without fear. Welcome, SJ.
Hello, good evening, Eugene.
Right, SJ, as you know, it has almost been 18 months since the national security law was implemented in Hong Kong, and the resulting actions actually has made some comments from overseas that our rule of law has been eroded. But I was very heartened to read that in June this year, Hong Kong was actually ranked 8th globally in the category of fair administration justice in the latest World Competitiveness Handbook in 2021, better than Britain in the 15th place and the US in the 23rd. And this is certainly an objective international recognition of the rule of law in Hong Kong. And do you agree?
Well, I totally agree. In fact, we have a very solid legal infrastructure for our rule of law. It's guaranteed and it's well protected in the basic law, and also a very strong independent judiciary that ensures that administration of justice is properly well guarded and dealt with fairly. So I think this is a good recognition of our work.
Right. In fact, I understand that Hong Kong was officially announced as a regional arbitration center for the Asian African Legal Consultative Organization. Actually, there's another recognition by an international body. And actually, they had the first time in Hong Kong last week.
Indeed. The Asian African Legal Consultative Organization, ALCO, if I call it in short, held its 59th annual session in Hong Kong. And that's the first time in Hong Kong, and we held it hybrid. And it's a very important organization because ALCO is the only organization that collates the Asian and African countries together in order to provide a unique practice and perspectives from the Asian and African countries in the development and codification of international law. And that is the only way in which international law can be developed in an inclusive and democratic manner. So this is a very important organization. And the fact that China and ALCO agreed to set up an arbitration center in Hong Kong shows the trust that they have in Hong Kong, as well as our strength in order to develop and promote arbitration for the Asian African countries and indeed beyond, so that we can provide an effective dispute resolution mechanism. So we're very, very fortunate to have the ALCO Hong Kong Regional Arbitration Center to be set up in Hong Kong. That's been announced at the annual session last week.
Right, SJ. So this basically, we have the golden stamp on Hong Kong as a very trusted place for such an organization.
Indeed.
Right.
And I think we can do a lot, not just promote Hong Kong as an arbitration center, but also provide a platform for discussion, for development of dispute resolution, and for countries to use Hong Kong as a place of arbitration.
Right. As we're in Hong Kong, like in many of our shows before, we are very embraced with the rule of law in Hong Kong. And I know the Department of Justice has launched a new initiative called Vision 2030, and to promote the understanding and recognition of the rule of law in Hong Kong. Can you elaborate that for us?
Well, we launched the Vision 2030 for rule of law in November last year at our Hong Kong Legal Week. And the idea of this project is a 10-year initiative. We picked 2030 as the time because we want to tally and we want to echo the UN 2030 agenda for sustainable development. And Goal 16 is particularly relevant to our rule of law initiative. That is why we picked the title as Vision 2030 for rule of law. With that, we're doing in a very broad way two main aspects. One, locally, we want to promote and encourage people to better and properly understand the rule of law. As well, of course, there are also the Constitution and the Basic Law. And through that, we have a program we call the 3 E's program.
Right.
The empowerment, the enrichment, and the enlightenment program for people, general public, for students, as well as for professionals. So that's what we're doing, as it were, domestically, trying to encourage and give opportunities for our development. The other aspect is that we've set up a task force for the rule of, for Vision 2030 in order to study how better we can improve our rule of law and perhaps to devise a system by which we can continue to improve ourselves. Right. And that is something that we are working on together with the experts in the task force. Right. And hopefully we can achieve that very soon. So that's a Vision 2030 project.
Right. SJI, I read that there's also a rule of law database. Can you just elaborate a bit more on that?
Well, a part of the exercise with the task force is that we looked at how rule of law can actually be better understood and better implemented and practiced. We find that sometimes by looking at the subjective perspective and views of individuals, it may not reflect the practice of rule of law best. And so for that reason, we find that 2 things: we look at objective data and we also look at culture, because sometimes the culture can affect how rule of law is being implemented in the relevant jurisdiction. So we introduce that because we hope that this project is not just going to be useful to Hong Kong. We want our neighbors and people in particular in the region to be able to contribute and cross-fertilize and learn from each other.
Right. SJ, as you know, our lawyers and judges have always been proud of our robust legal system. And actually, our president of our Law Society, Mr. C.M. Chan, last week said that the independent judiciary is an essential cornerstone to the rule of law. Do you agree with him? And why is judicial independence such an important factor for the rule of law?
Well, when we talk about rule of law, we talked about everybody abiding by the law. We talk about a transparent legal system that is available to everybody, as well as the laws are something to be understood and accepted and abide by the general public. So that's a very broad understanding, a very important understanding of the rule of law. Everybody has to abide by the law. But then we also have to cater for situation in any civilized society, a way by which disputes are to be resolved. Right. Under the Constitution, it would be the judiciary who would be dealing with the disputes in the society. And therefore, the independence of the judiciary in handling these disputes are absolutely important in upholding the rule of law and in ensuring that it is well observed and practiced. Right. And so it's something that we very much cherished. Right. So I think that is a very correct statement, that the independence of the judiciary is a cornerstone to our rule of law.
So, Teresa, I just want to ask you, we often read in newspapers that some of our judges will be receiving different threats or different things against them. What is your view on that? Well,
I think those acts are totally to be condemned. It's not something that people in a civilized society should tolerate. I think what they show is that they show their ignorance, their cowardice, and perhaps, and indeed, their failure to respect the rule of law. Right. I tell you why. Because when we in our system, the judgments are publicly available on the internet. Right. You can go and look at them. In the judgments, you can read the reasons by which the judge come to a particular decision, and they would set out the law as well as the evidence relied upon. And so one should look at the reason as opposed merely looking at the result in order to say this is a good or bad judgment. Right. And you can discuss the judgment, but you mustn't just out of your own volition, because you don't like the particular result, you go and condemn the judge and attack the judge and threaten the judge. These are criminal acts, and the enforcing agencies are going to do their best to ensure that these people will be brought before the law. And I would encourage everybody to condemn these sort of acts and respect our judicial independence and uphold our rule of law.
And actually, essentially, if they are unhappy with any of the ruling, they have the normal channel to appeal, so there's no reason to do any such acts at all.
Very right. And the parties themselves have that particular mechanism. And if you wish to discuss the reasoning of the judgment, of course, you can do it in an objective and rational manner. That's permissible. But by looking at the results and thinking that it is your own personal dislike about the result and then start attacking the judiciary, these acts are not going to go anywhere because we have a very strong independent judiciary. They will not be affected, and they only expose their own cowardice and ignorance.
Right. Teresa, I think in the last part of this first part of the show, I want to talk about the Hong Kong as an international legal and dispute resolution hub, which is supported by the central government on the National 14th Five-Year Plan. Just tell our viewers briefly, what is the niche in Hong Kong? Why do we get the position? And why are we better than other mainland cities?
Well, in the National 14th Five-Year Plan and indeed in the Greater Bay Area Development Plan, Hong Kong has been particularly identified as being supported to be developed into an international legal and dispute resolution hub in the Asia-Pacific region. Our strengths are, first of all, our own inherent strengths include our very strong arbitration culture, our very good soft power, namely the experts and talents that we have in arbitration and in legal dispute resolution. We have also a very good legal infrastructure. That means our laws that support it are very up-to-date and cutting edge. And of course, also we have a very strong independent judiciary that provides excellent supervision for the proper conduct of the arbitration process itself. So all these are inherent strengths. Of course, other cities may be able to develop that, but then it comes to the very unique strength, as you in your question as to why Hong Kong so particular, it's because of one country, two systems. And under that, we have two main areas to look at. One, Hong Kong is the only common law jurisdiction in the whole of China. So therefore, it provides a very good choice for parties who wish to resolve their disputes using common law or in a common law jurisdiction. Secondly, under one country, two systems, we have been able to secure a number of very, very unique arrangements with the mainland. For example, in 2019, we were able to secure an arrangement, reached an agreement with the mainland, whereby we can have an interim measure application being conducted. So, and there is also the supplemental agreement on the enforcement of arbitral awards. I would like to mention a little bit about the uniqueness of that.
Okay, let's take a break and don't go away. Welcome back. We have been talking with Secretary of Justice, Teresa Chang, who has been sharing with us how the rule of law has been and is still upheld in Hong Kong as always. This gives us a good foundation to discuss our main question tonight: can people exercise their right to vote without fear? So, SJ, before we move on that topic, since you are being a very experienced and seasoned arbitrator before you joined the government, you mentioned there are two uniqueness of Hong Kong arbitration that puts Hong Kong in such a world map. Can you just reiterate that 2 points again?
Thank you. First of all, between Hong Kong and mainland, we've reached an arrangement whereby parties to arbitration in Hong Kong can apply to the mainland courts for interim measure, meaning injunctions or orders of the court for preservation of evidence, preservation of assets and conduct. And this is very important in arbitration because the only jurisdiction outside of the mainland where that can be done is Hong Kong. And that makes Hong Kong arbitration very, very important. The second is a supplemental agreement that we've signed, a supplemental arrangement we've signed to enhance the enforcement of arbitral awards in Hong Kong. And now we can enforce our awards both in the mainland together at the same time in Hong Kong courts, rather than to wait for one after another. I'd like also to mention something a little bit forward-looking, and that is we are exploring the feasibility of expanding the scope of allowing enterprises that are Hong Kong enterprises or Hong Kong-owned enterprises in the mainland, in particular in Shenzhen area. They can use Hong Kong law as the applicable law and to arbitrate in Hong Kong even there is no foreign-related elements.
Right. Okay.
And that is very welcomed and very important for the Hong Kong businesses.
Right. Teresa, I want to ask you, what has the department done to encourage businesses from other parts of the world, even the mainland Chinese enterprises, to use Hong Kong as the center of arbitration?
In fact, the very thing that I've mentioned, and those arrangements, has been described, in particular the interim measure arrangement, has been described as the game changer in the international arbitration community. So I think that has attracted a lot of people to come and continue to arbitrate in Hong Kong. And if we are able to expand the scope of Hong Kong enterprises being able to use Hong Kong law as the governing law in their contracts, it will attract even more people to want to come to use Hong Kong as a platform to set up their business and invest into the Greater Bay Area, and therefore attract Hong Kong law being used as well. So I think those are the things that we're continuously doing.
So SJ, you know, with the improved electoral system, we have 3 major elections. I mean, one was the election committee that was in September. Next week there will be electrical election, and then next year there will be CE election, and they are all been under according to the improving the electoral system, consolidated amendment ordinance. I can read this to get it right. So, SJ, Hong Kong must be able to vote without fear. So, do you think our new rules will ensure we can have a fair election?
I think we definitely will be able to achieve that.
Right.
We've already done one of the 3 elections in September, and of course on the 19th of December we will be electing our LegCo members. Now this new law that has been enacted actually is a very important milestone in the democratic development of Hong Kong. We all know that the basic law remains unchanged, but we want to ensure that we're moving in the right direction in the development of our democratic system, our LegCo, our election committee, and our chief executive election. And therefore, the system has been set up to encourage broader representation and also to encourage a balanced and orderly participation of the people who come to stand for election, as well as our right to vote. Now, I want to highlight it's actually been achieved because for the first time, I understand that for the functional constituencies, all functional constituencies have candidates that are competing for the role.
Yes, yes.
And that is a very good sign of why this new development is going to develop a healthy, transparent and fair participation of the candidates to stand for election in LegCo. And I really would like to encourage all our citizens who have the right to vote to exercise their right, because it is a duty for all of us to vote, and then also to ensure that the best candidate would then be elected to have a rational and very patriotic legislative council.
Yes, Teresa, so from a legal perspective, you think this is going to bring a much better Hong Kong ahead?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Last week we had Commissioner Simon Pei from ICAC came, and he told us that the 3 persons were arrested because they were inciting people to cast blank votes. As you know, there will be new election laws coming through. Can you just, since I know you are the gatekeeper, just briefly tell our viewers what must not be done, because I'm sure no one wants to get into trouble.
Well, I would like perhaps to look at it in this way. It is the duty and, in fact, our right to vote in order to select the right people. Well, first of all, I should mention that any cases that are ongoing, be they under investigation or passed to the Department of Justice for consideration of prosecution, we cannot comment. But let's look at what we must do, and I think that's important. The duty and the right of each of us to cast a vote in order to select the most suitable candidate to stand and represent us in the Legislative Council is something that is very important for anyone who wants Hong Kong to develop in a very good way and in a very orderly way and in line with the one country, 2 system. So I think we must all continue to bear that in mind. Attempts to try and incite people to do anything that will affect and destroy this very important right and duty to ensure our healthy and steady growth in the democratic system is not something legally or otherwise to be encouraged. So I would like to look at it in a positive way. Look at our right. It's a right that is given to us by the laws, and it is a duty as a citizen to cast a vote in order to select the right person, in order to meet the very important motive, the idea of having patriots helping to administer and to run the various parts of the Hong Kong government and the Legislative Council. So I think it's very important to look at it in a very positive way.
Yes, Jay. I want to move on to one question that I've asked repeatedly over my last shows. As you know, Hong Kongers, especially legal profession, we take great pride in our rule of law, and it really concerns me and others that we read reports, particularly from overseas, that our rule of law has been eroded. Let me quote you from a report tabled to the UK Parliament. It says that the National People's Congress acted unilaterally in its decision on the electoral improvements without prior consent from the Hong Kong Legislative Council, and that this action reverses the mainland promise to Hong Kong in the Basic Law of gradual progress towards a system of universal suffrage, and further hollows out the Legislative Council. See, reports like this have been brought to us by our friends and relatives overseas, and if we want to rebut these concerns, what would be the main line to take? Because you are the best person to tell us briefly what are the main points we have to defend our rule of law, especially reading all these reports from overseas.
The simple and direct answer is that you look at our Constitution and the Basic Law. The central authorities always have certain powers and duties, and to ensure that our democratic system is going to be developed, it's actually one of the duties that are enshrined in the organ, the National People's Congress, which is the highest the organ of the highest authority in the whole of China. It is they who will decide, in fact, it is they who decided to set up a special administrative region in Hong Kong. Yes, it is they, under the Constitution, Article 31 and Article 62, who will set out and lay down the structure and the framework and the rules and for the development of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. So if you look at the Constitution and if you look at the Basic Law, this is already well enshrined there. People would comment about things totally oblivious to these very important constitutional infrastructure that we have in Hong Kong and making those statements. So I think they were made because they do not understand our constitutional order, and they therefore, if they look at it, they will understand that this is entirely within the purview of the central authorities, and it is actually done totally in line with one country, two systems, because right at the start, when one country, two system was being formulated in the form of a policy, it was said that it's to be patriots administering Hong Kong. And therefore, what is being done now is actually to implement that very policy, which is enshrined in the Constitution and the Basic Law.
So, Teresa, I think I'm going to ask you give you a very brief message to a young professional, because I know many young lawyers, budding young lawyers, they want to serve Hong Kong, they want to uphold the rule of law, but in the last few years they have been bombarded with the COVID and then the social unrest. What is your simple message to our young budding professionals, especially lawyers?
Hong Kong's rule of law is very strong. You look at the facts in order to come to the opinion, because all you need is to experience it here in Hong Kong and you will see that. The common law is going to continue to be applied in Hong Kong if we are able to ensure that we observe the one country as the basis, and therefore the two systems will continue to thrive. And therefore continuing to study the law and of course to come back and practice will be a very good opportunity to contribute to the development of Hong Kong and then of course the country as a whole.
Right. Thank you, SJ Teresa Chang, for sharing with us your insights on the legal scene in Hong Kong and your views on the upcoming election. I think our viewers have been reassured that we can all exercise our right to vote without fear. Thank you for joining us. Have a good week and good night.